Alright guys, welcome back to the video. So before we jump in and start cutting in the mortises and start to do like a dry fit and all that on the bed assembly, I wanted to talk about this Cubatron 2 sandpaper. Because on the video where I said that this stuff I think is garbage, a lot of you responded saying you actually love it. And you have no issues, it doesn't come flying off your sander, all that kind of stuff. So I honestly have no idea what the solution is here. I do think I have to take back my words. I don't know if it is an issue with this stuff. Again, I kind of attributed it to this because I've always had an issue with it, even when my sander was brand new. But I bought 6 different boxes of this. So I have the whole range of Cubatron 2, and it all came in separate boxes, so I don't know if it is actually the paper or it is something to do with my sander. So the sander that I started using this stuff on is this old DeWalt one. Now this one, I don't know how old it is. It belonged to my dad before I ever got it. And it does not hold it, you can see that there. You can hear that the Velcro just doesn't grip at all. And so this pad is, again, like I said, I don't even know how old it's probably the original pad that came on the sander. I'm not surprised that the Velcro doesn't stick to that. That's why I replaced it. And so then I've also got my Bosch sander with a hard pad on it. So the hard pad is an optional accessory you can order off Amazon, which it's really important for the stuff that I do, because especially with the other sander, because it's got a softer pad on it, I noticed that I'd get dips and grooves in it. So with this hard pad, I find it very helpful. But when I put it on there, and as you guys saw in that video, there really isn't anything holding on. Like you can see that it just kind of peels right off. What could be happening here is I've just used this pad enough that I've worn it out, which if that's the case, that's horrible on Bosch's case, because that pad should not wear out that quickly. I don't sand that often. I mainly use like hand planes, and I have my drum sander and all that. So I don't use this thing enough to have worn it out in a year. So if that's the case, that is pretty bad on Bosch's part. But so the last thing I want to check is there's also the soft pad that came with my sander. Now I've only used this a couple times. I used it for a little while I was waiting for that hard pad to show up, and I've used it a couple times when I need to sand, some curvier surfaces. So when I put the pad on there is a little bit more grip to it, but it still doesn't really take a whole lot of effort to peel it off. Like I'm massaging it in there, it's all in there, and there is definitely, there is some resistance there, but it's not enough. And so the reason I hit that point with the Cubatron 2 stuff is because I also had this other cheaper brand. I don't know, it was like Tiger Shark or something, some really generic brand off of Amazon, and I would stick that stuff on here and it would be absolutely no issue. I could hold the sander upside down and the pad would never fly off because the Velcro on there was strong enough. The only ones that I found really worked with the Cubatron 2 was the original style before they made the mesh version. The style that has no holes in it. This overall seemed to have enough holding power to not go flying off. So you can hear that there is actually a decent amount of hold on there. And going back to our theoretically worn down pad here, it definitely does, it holds a little bit better, but still not good. So I am kind of convinced that this pad is just worn out already, which, that's gonna be 20 bucks a year basically to replace this pad. So that sucks, because that's where I get really confused, because both the original Cubatron, so the ones that had like the million little holes in them, and this mesh stuff, I've had issues with both of them. I've been using this stuff for a long time now, and it's just always had an issue. So it's really annoying. I don't know why I bought the Cubatron 2 mesh when I had so many issues with the first one, but I got really hopeful about it and just bought into it completely. So if you guys have any suggestions, again, short of me buying a new sander, because that's not particularly an option, I may try ordering a new hard pad for my sander just to see if that solves it. And once it gets here, I will let you guys know. Obviously, it's not going to help out too many people because you guys aren't having this issue. So apparently I'm just special. So if you guys have any advice, anything you think I could do to solve this issue, please let me know. I really look forward to you guys' comments and ideas on this, because it is super annoying when, you can't even lift the sander off the piece of work without the disc shooting across the shop. So it's a problem that I need to find a solution to. I don't know if it means going with a different brand of sandpaper, but again, like a lot of you guys said, this stuff does work great. It does really well. It lasts a nice long time. All that stuff. It's just really annoying that I can't seem to hold it on any sander I have. So now we're gonna move on to getting the tenons cut onto the long stretchers. So we're just gonna cut a nice simple 1 1/4 tenon on each side. Because we already have our groove in place, we know that we're gonna lose a 1/2 inch off of this side, so we might as well just take a 1/2 inch off the other side just to make things a little bit more even. Then we know from our side rails, we're gonna go in 3/8 from either side because these are 1 3/4 inch thick. That'll leave us with a nice 1 inch tenon. And then we know we're gonna have a pretty hefty amount of material to be mounting into a mortise later on. So we're gonna be doing the tenons on here the same way we did them on the side rails, just using the router to clear out the 2 faces. Then we'll just hand cut the 2 sides, because that's kind of the easiest way to do it at this point. So just like every other part of this project, are these tenons absolutely perfect? No, but they're gonna work for what we need. There is gonna be a decent amount of cleanup on the shoulders here with the hand plane later on, because as I was going through and I was kind of starting to size them up, I noticed that some of our router lines here are not the greatest, which is not really surprising given what we saw on the side rails. So now it's time to cut the mortises. So we already have our mortise locations marked out nicely enough because we marked our lines up. We took our measurement from where we want the bottom of the stitch to be, went 1/2 inch up, and that's exactly what we just did on all of our tenons there. So now we just have to measure up 2 15/16 because that's kind of the random number that our tenons came out to be. So we'll measure up, mark a line there, and then we have our start and stop point for the routers. We're just gonna put that mortise cutting base back on the plunge router, get everything set back up. And so then all we need to do is just plunge in till we get 1 and just over 1/4 inch long mortise. That way we can fit our tenons in there and everything should go together nice. Then we'll actually be able to start fitting stuff up and putting things together. So like we talked about when we did the mortises on this side, when you have that router plunged all the way deep into that mortise, it's nearly impossible to see where your bit is and how to figure out how close you are to the end wall. And if you do contact that end wall when your bit is fully plunged, you're gonna have issues. So you'll notice when I'm doing the mortises on this side now, I'm not using any kind of stops on either end. And the trick is there's not really a good place to put them, especially when we're doing the mortise on this side. There's nowhere to put a stop that on this side that is going to prevent the router from hitting that back wall. So if you watch closely, what I do when I start doing the routing is I go to each end and I just plunge all the way down to my full depth. So you have to be very careful when you're doing that first plunge because if you move your router at all, it's going to catch and crazy things are going to happen. So you have to very slowly lower that router down, let it bite it, let it dig its own hole, and then it'll be fine. And you're going to do that on both ends. That way when you plunge in on one side to make your cut, you can very clearly tell when you're actually cutting because for one, chips will be flying out, and for two, you should be able to hear it. So if you're wearing like super intense headphones that completely block out all noise of the router, probably not the good time for those. So what you're listening for here is as soon as your bit stops cutting the wood, and you can very, very clearly hear it with a router. So it should be within about 1/2 inch of this wall back here. So then you're either gonna pull your bit all the way out of the workpiece, or you're just gonna pull your router back and do your next pass. And so the trick here is this is not as good as installing the stops. Again, the stops are a hard point that will completely prevent you from hitting those end walls. This method is a little bit better than just kind of going for it, but it still has some safety concerns to it that you still have to be aware of what you're doing. So again, it's all about taking your time, going nice and slow, and only making small passes. And when you reach that final pass where your bit is going to be fully enclosed in the wood, you just have to be very careful with what you're doing. Take nice steady passes, move slowly, move your whole body, don't just move your arms. You want to use your whole body to move that router along. That'll give you a nice steady pass. And again, you want to be watching very closely because as soon as you start visually seeing that you're getting close to the end, you want to start listening to that sound. And as soon as your bit stops cutting, stop pushing the router. So that's the safest way I found to do it. Again, it's not ideal, but it's probably the second safest way to cut a mortise with a router. So in some ways, I really miss doing mortise and tenon like this all the time because it's actually a lot of fun. You know, there's a big physical aspect to it. You know, you're sitting here hammering away with a chisel. It's a lot of fun, you know, whereas like the mortiser, it's you know, you're just pulling down a lever and it cuts a mortise. It's not as, you know, it's not as exciting. Whereas like doing this, it's a fun time in woodworking. But I have to say that I also would not want to do this on like the bedroom set project or basically any of the projects I've done in the past where I had the mortiser. I wouldn't want to have to use this method because it's exhausting. You know, after doing these, what do we do here? After doing these 8 mortises, my arms are kind of tired. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do much more of this. And we still have a whole bunch more to do. But anyway, what we're going to do now is start fitting up the long stretchers so we can actually see what our footboard and headboard is going to look like. So it should be a fairly simple process because we now have our mortises fit in here. All we have to do is just remove some of the material from the sides of those tenons on the long stretchers until they fit in here. They should be a perfect fit on the vertical here just because I measured that pretty accurately. But overall, there might be some minor adjustments that we have to do there because with the chisel, I probably didn't create perfectly square sidewalls here. So there probably is going to be some work we have to do. But overall, it should be a pretty quick and easy process for fitting up those long stretchers. So I don't know if y'all remember, but in one of the previous videos, I said that this was looking pretty small when I had the side rails fully assembled up on the bench here. I fully take that back. The headboard is behind me there. That thing is massive. The footboard is in front of the lathe there. It too is massive. This project just went from, oh, it doesn't seem that big to, holy crap, this is a big project. So now that I have all the pieces together, we've got all the mortise and tenon cut, all of our stretchers fitting up. I think this is all we're going to do construction-wise today because I don't want to do anymore. I am so exhausted. That was a lot of work fitting up those tenons. There's still a little bit of work to be done. There's only one spot where, I can't remember which one it is. Oh yeah, it's this bottom stretcher right down here where we have a little bit of a gap at the top where I obviously just slipped with the router. But I'm not going to worry about it too much because when we actually glue this up, I can either add some filler in there or it's in a spot that will never be seen ever. So I'm not really concerned about that little gap in there. And again, I can just add some filler if it really bugs me. But for the most part, we have good, clean shoulder lines around all this stuff. So the one thing I do want to mention though is you guys saw me use my little rabbeting block plane here. So the rabbeting means that it has an open side right there. So that means that it can go right up into a corner and cut all the way into that corner with the blade. So I tried to use this to clean up the shoulders of the tenon, and that doesn't really work. It works really great for cleaning up the faces of the tenon, those nice wide faces. This works way better than I think a shoulder plane would. But when you're cleaning up the shoulders of a tenon, this can't really replace that. Just purely because the center of gravity of it is really weird. Because it's such a tall plane and there's not really a good place when it's on its side like that to push it with, it just was kind of clumsy. I thought that I would be able to use this in kind of in place of a shoulder plane, but I think that eventually once they come back in stock at Lee Valley, I'm definitely going to kind of up that on the priority list because I want to get a good shoulder plane so that I can actually tune up the shoulders of tenons a little bit better. Because right now I kind of have to go between that, using some sandpapers, using some files and that. Overall, the technique that I'm using right now is a little bit more on the clumsy side. I don't like that as much. I'd love to have a tool that is designed specifically for cleaning up the shoulders of tenons. So that'll come eventually. And so there is one last thing I want to do today before I close down the shop, and that is I want to put this whole thing together, which means that I have to spend a little bit of time here clearing out this back area of the shop. Same as we did when I brought in that sheet of MDF. I'm going to move the lathe just out of the way. I'm going to try and clear out enough space at the back end of the shop here. I'll open the garage door and all that so we have enough space to hopefully put all of these frames together. Because now we've got the headboard, we've got the footboard. Now we can put the side rails in there, bolt them together, and just see how giant this thing is actually going to be. Okay, so that is the bed frame all together. I went around with my little Bosch laser measurer thing, and within the internals here, we are off by maybe a 32nd of an inch on the dimensions that I was aiming for. So a normal king size bed is 80 inches long by 76 inches wide. So I made the internal space here 81 inches long and 77 inches wide, and we are almost precisely on those measurements there. So that is absolutely perfect. The space in here is going to be just awesome. And I think the best part about this is the fact that we use those big 1/2 inch bolts on each of the corners, because as was commented by Walter, when you build a bed frame, you want to make sure it's sturdy for certain activities that may happen in a bed. So even though this is just kind of a facade of a bed frame, it is absolutely solid. There is absolutely no racking in our side construction there. Once we get all the headboard and that glued up, this is going to be about as solid as you could possibly imagine. The one bad thing about building this whole thing is it's gotten me really interested in jumping into timber frame construction. I've kind of been watching videos and doing all that and looking into that kind of stuff. I don't really have any space to do or any real timber frame projects that I could do, but it's something that I want to try so badly now. And after working with like big joinery like this, it's even more on my mind of like stuff that I could potentially do, because this is awesome. How big this is and how well everything came out together. Even though I don't really have the tools and machinery to really be building something this big, I've managed to build something this big and it's accurate. That's the coolest thing in my opinion. And you know, we're getting there. We will definitely be done this project by the end of this week. So tomorrow we'll come back in, get all of our divider pieces fit up. That'll be nice and easy because we can do all of that on the table saw. So finally we get to use the machinery to our advantage. Then we just have to fit up the white oak panels. And the finishing process is definitely going to take a little while because we've got a lot of pieces here that are, again, very large. We're going to be using the hand plane on most of them because I still haven't solved that whole Cubatron 2 issue that I have. So we're going to be hand planing most of them, and then we might do some finish sanding with some 220 grit. But for the most part, we're getting there. It's starting to, well, it is a bed frame right now. You could literally put it in a bed right now. Might not be super solid on the length here, but overall, we've got a solid bed frame. And now the biggest question of, is this going to be the actual right size when we get all their joinery completed? we now know that it is going to be the right size to fit a king-size bed. And with that, we're going to end the video here for today. Like I said, tomorrow we're going to start doing some more of the final stuff, getting the headboard and footboard actually finished off. I really thought I was going to get to that point today, but I hit a few snags, mainly the block plane when I had to resharpen it. I apparently screwed up the angle the last time I sharpened it, and it was totally off, so I had to do a bunch of stuff there. That took a really long time. Plus, just doing all this stuff, you know, really everything here just takes a lot more time than you normally think, because you really can't batch things out like you would with smaller components. So again, we're in a really awesome position. I'm really excited to come back to this tomorrow. But as always, guys, I do hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.